For our next meeting, we have a meeting next month, which will be in person, February 13th. We'll have dinner and networking starting at 5:30. Then our meeting starts at 6. And at 7 o'clock, we have our real world SME session where people are able to bring real problems or questions that they have regarding project management and get advice. And our speaker is our very own Takesha McLean. I don't know how to say your other last name, Takesha.
It's Chalmers.
Okay. And she will be speaking on navigating the leap from project management to executive leadership. So if you're interested in hearing about how to become a CEO, next month would be a great meeting for you to attend. And we are definitely hoping to see you all there in person at Bethel, as usual. Travis, do you have a question?
I just wanted to mention when you said something about the membership, I sent out January expiration reminders for members that have their membership is due to expire this month. We got 17 people. Quite a few of them had the auto renew set to off or without a setting. So I wanted to throw a reminder out that PMI does have a toggle setting for auto renew. And if you haven't looked at it in a while, please take the time, PMI.com, to look at your membership settings. I can't count how many members last year between June to December reached out and weren't aware that they had expired because of the auto setting. So just wanted to throw it out.
Thank you. Okay, and I think I said this, but if I didn't, my name is Sherry Tefelsky. I'm the president of our chapter. And then we have several other board members on tonight. So Travis, that was just talking, is our VP of Publicity and Communication. We have Amber, who is our VP of Programs. We have Brian Holt, who just recently made the exciting jump from VP of Outreach to VP of Administration. He's really excited about that. So we should all congratulate him wholeheartedly. And then I don't think Christine is on here. She's our VP of Membership. And I don't think I missed anybody. Okay, so I would ask you all to mute your phones if you're not already muted. And I will turn things over to Amber to introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for dialing in from wherever you're at. If you are not from our PMI group, if you're from elsewhere, you can submit your PMI number to us so that we can do those PDUs for you. Or you're always welcome to go to the PMI website yourself and enter your own PDUs for this event and other events that you might attend. So today we have a PMI-PMP expert with us, John Sanderson. He is calling in from Melbourne, Florida. He has more initials behind his name than I could ever list off. And he comes with lots of expertise and a dry sense of humor that you'll see today. We're going to talk about Agile and kind of a little introduction there. With that being said, I'll pass it over to John.
All right, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. As far as the sound is concerned, you're kind of fading in and out, so I'm hoping my microphone is working better than my speakers on my end. But if there's any problems, we can always reset. So, do I have any engineers in the audience today?
Oh,
Got a couple, because I was thinking as I was going through this about this joke. So I can start with a joke. We'll see how it goes, and I'll see how the reaction I get and whether I have to step it up or not. But there were 3 engineers driving in a car, and there was a mechanical engineer driving, an electrical engineer was in the front seat as the passenger, and a software engineer in the back seat. The car suddenly stops, and the mechanical engineer says, well, obviously the way the car just stopped, it's a mechanical problem. And luckily I have my tools in the trunk, so I'm gonna, we'll diagnose it. We'll figure out what it is. Hopefully we have enough, it doesn't need a part. We'll get on the road in no time. The electrical engineer looks at him and says, that's crazy. Obviously, the way the car just stopped suddenly like that, it's got to be an electrical problem. So fortunately, I have my testing tools in the back. I'll go ahead and test the system. We'll figure out what's wrong. We'll get on the road in no time. And the software engineer in the back says, you guys are absolutely crazy. All we have to do is get out of the car and get back into the car. All right. Well, okay. So we have some. Not everyone's sleeping at the end of the day, so that's good. I don't know if the jokes are going to get any better than that. I might have just pulled out the best one at the beginning. But my name is John Sanderson, as Amber said, and yeah, I do have a few initials after my name. I've been doing a lot of teaching over the last 12 years or so, mostly PMP prep. So I've been doing that. I went ahead and got some additional letters. In fact, those letters up there on the slide are not all the letters that I have, but somebody just told me, okay, you just got to stop putting the letters on there. You're just bragging. But actually, we were talking about getting a job. One of the things I can tell you, if you have a lot of certifications, is I was told one time a couple of years ago during COVID, when I was looking for a job, that I had too many certifications. They said, you weren't serious. You are more focused on getting certifications than you are actually doing the job. So, if you have a lot of certifications, you might back off and just use the ones that are pertinent for the job. Obviously, you're going to include the PMP if you have that. All right. So what I have found is there are a lot of folks that are kind of confused about this thing called Agile. And I know that there's a lot of demand for, okay, what is it? What do we need to know about it? Obviously, in the next, where are we? Probably in the next 45 or so minutes, we're not going to have enough, or no one's going to have enough to be able to, go and get a certified Scrum Master or anything like that, unless you already have it. But I wanted to give you an overview of both the similarities and differences among what we would have as traditional or predictive project management and what is considered Agile. And, the reason I say that, and the reason I think it's important, is, in my opinion, many projects are going to wind up to be what we would call hybrid projects. I think that's the fastest growing area of project management. And, within the next few years, 5 or 10 years, I would imagine, and again, I have no data to back this up, it's just my own personal opinion, that most projects in the world are going to be a form of hybrid, which is a little bit of predictive, a little bit of Agile put together because of the nature of the projects that we have. Blends, yeah. Well, PMI calls it hybrid. So I'm sticking to the PMI terms, but yes, we can, sometimes the terms that we have or whatever makes sense. So I can tell you where this came from. I was doing a PMP class in Anchorage, Alaska. I was doing the class for a bunch of construction project managers. And I don't know for sure whether everyone in that room could actually spell Agile, but they definitely had some problems with it. They had some concerns. So one of them said, hey, is there any way that you could just up there on the easel pad, kind of put 2 columns in there and go side by side of what we do in predictive versus what is done in Agile, so we can kind of get an understanding and kind of put that together. So that was the beginning of what I am presenting tonight. Obviously expanded it a little bit, but you'll see the just about the original that I had put up for that particular group. It was well received, so I've been doing it in every PMP class since. And hopefully it will be something that will make sense to each one of you. So let me just kind of get a little bit of a poll here. I know we have at least one Scrum Master. Is there anyone else that has had experience with Agile or is certified in Agile on the call? So we have.
And I just want to throw out there, I know I told you guys all to mute your phones, but you're welcome to unmute, like, and answer questions or ask questions during the presentation. I just wanted to keep them kind of to a minimum the rest of the time.
Oh, I appreciate that because I could ask a question and no one's going to, and think no one's really answering. But all right, so we have a few folks that are certified. So let me say before I get into the bulk of the presentation, if you are an Agilist, if you are one of those purists in Agile, you may have some problems with some of the things that I'm going to say. So it's not exactly 100%. This is equivalent from left to right. But the reason I do this in the way I do it is for understanding, because I think that is important to at least get an understanding of some things. And if I'm using the term slightly off from what it says in the Scrum guide, I apologize up front. But again, my goal is for understanding and try to get some things. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of combinations that we're going to have. I'm going to talk about Scrum a little bit later because it is the most popular of the Agile frameworks in the world. But let's get into some of this material. So let me go back. I hit it twice. I apologize. So we have a few objectives, and I know I listed these objectives. They might sound a little bit ominous for the next 45 minutes, but we're going to touch on each one of these. So I want everyone to leave here with maybe a little bit better understanding about Agile project management, its place in the world. And also we're going to talk about kind of a base. How are predictive project management, the traditional project management that we have in Agile, the same? Is there anything that is the same? And where are they different? And we'll also talk about where does Agile make sense? Now, one of the things for those of you who may not have a PMP at this point or may have got a PMP prior to January 1st of 2021, you may have heard that the PMP exam is a little bit different now. About 50% of it is what would be considered Agile project management. And if you think about what PMI is trying to do, they're trying to say, if as a certified project manager, with the understanding that every project is unique, they want you to have a toolkit of different activities, different processes, different things you can use depending on the context of the project. Sometimes it makes sense to develop a big plan and then work the plan. And sometimes it makes sense to break things down and use a lightweight process. And sometimes it makes sense to use a combination. So I think what they're trying to do is we want to have a person leading a project who can pick the tool out of the toolkit that makes sense for the current project. So one of the things is understand when Agile makes sense and then use those tools. And then also, as we're going through this, one of the things I think is going to be helpful regardless is there anything within Agile, if you're a predictive project manager, that we can we can borrow from Agile? Because one of the things that I found, and I know anybody's a purist, you're really going to not like this. I have taken things from Agile, like some of the collaboration, some of the consensus, and the estimating techniques that are in Agile, and I've used them in a predictive project. Likewise, and I know this is really going to get some of you, I have actually, since I love work breakdown structures, I have used work breakdown structures in Agile projects. And I know that some Scrum Masters, you're probably, I'm looking, no one's head is spinning yet, but it's just one of those things. Why not? There's no law against it. Let's use the things that work. no matter where they came from. So that's what, as we go through this, think about that as we add to our toolkit here. And then we'll talk a little bit about the most popular of the Agile frameworks, which is Scrum. How popular is it? The latest survey that I've seen is that of all the Agile related implementations, what framework are you using when you answer that question? About 55% of the Agile implementations of the framework are actually Scrum. And if you add Scrum and something else, like Scrum and Kanban or Scrum and extreme programming, or one of my favorite expressions, Scrum but. What Scrum but is. We use Scrum but we don't do daily stand-ups, or we use Scrum but we don't do retrospectives. That combination comes out to about 70%. About 70%. So that is by far the most popular framework that we're going to use. And yes, Scrum Bud is actually is a term that is used, and some of you probably know that. And the people that came up, the co-creators of Scrum, would probably say that's not a good idea to use part of it. But we do what we do that is going to work for our projects. All right, so those are the objectives. We'll come back and see if we hit any or all of them at the end of the presentation. But let's now talk about some of the commonalities. Let's get a foundation on how these two approaches to project management are similar, because let's face it, some things are just the way they are. What is the definition of a project? It is a temporary endeavor. Now, I know what the PMBOK guide definition, a temporary endeavor to create a unique product, service, or result, right? But I'm going to change that a little bit and say a temporary endeavor creating value for the organization. And I think that PMI is going more toward that definition. But hey, whether it's a predictive project or whether it is an Agile project, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create change. We're trying to add value to our organization. Another similarity is we deal with people. We call them stakeholders. And guess what? People are people, and our stakeholders are people, no matter whether we're doing a predictive project or an Agile project. We have people doing the work. Those are team members. And every project is subject to those things called competing constraints. Very simply, as project managers, you realize that you are doing a balancing act. And you're doing a balancing act constantly. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about just the main three constraints. I know that there are others, there's quality and resources risk as well, but let's just talk about the big three: scope, schedule, and cost. We realize as we're putting a plan together, at whatever level we're putting that plan together, what we're going to deliver, how long it's going to take, how much is it going to cost, that's a balancing act. And anytime anybody comes and wants to make a change to one of those, we got to rebalance. Now, I have a lot of stakeholders, and maybe some of you have had these same stakeholders in your life that did not believe in that triple constraint. They believed, actually, when I was living in South Bend, the business unit president that I dealt with, one of his favorite terms that he would come up to me on a constant basis: can we add this little thing to the project? It shouldn't take any more time or cost any more money. He did not believe in the triple constraint. I've always said the triple constraint is kind of like gravity, right? It exists. Whether you believe in it or not, it exists. If you are falling out of a 4-story building, gravity is going to apply whether you believe it will or not. So those are the similarities. And some other similarities: we have people leading the effort. Those are called project managers. And of course, we all know that we get well rewarded for the success of the project. You think I'm serious about that. But I bet you understand that I'm serious about this next one. We also get blamed for any failures within the project. Now I see some nods. Okay, we're there now. So hopefully we do get rewarded, but we certainly tend to take the blame. Now, one of the things about Agile is we're going to find that we actually share the blame. in Agile. A lot of it is shared with other people. So that's kind of nice. We're not the ones always on the hook. All right, so let's take a look, if we could, at each individual type of life cycle. So predictive, or what would be called waterfall project management. Sometimes I've seen, they call it traditional, although that one's kind of, and I don't necessarily agree with that. When would we use predictive or waterfall project management? Well, you would use it when the end result is well in focus. I kind of, look at this as saying that where I want to wind up, I got a pretty good idea about it. It is well in focus in front of me. And I'm going to use probably the most common or the most easiest to understand examples of predictive versus agile project management. Probably the easiest to understand and understand why we use it is a construction project. A construction project, you can draw a picture, an architectural drawing of the building that you're trying to build. We know what it's going to look like. It's well in focus. In that case, predictive works great. The requirements can be defined pretty well up front. And scope also is well defined. We can put it all together. And based on that, we can estimate the other two constraints. How long is it going to take and how much is it going to cost? And we put together this big plan, and we plan all the other areas, all those other knowledge areas that we would see in the PMBOK guide, and produce a plan. Another name for predictive or waterfall project management is plan driven. Because once we have that plan in place, what drives the project forward is following the plan. So we develop the plan, it gets approved or baseline, and that is what drives the project forward from that point. And we all know that plans are perfect. We also, if we have any experience with project management, understand we ruin everything by executing them. And then suddenly they aren't so perfect. But the plans themselves are perfect. And, one of the things and one of the reasons that Agile actually came about was in areas where it is tough to do a detailed plan. I can tell you many, many years I did software development projects. And when I first started doing software development projects, we built a big plan. Why? Because that's all we knew. Scrum wasn't around. Extreme programming wasn't around until the first shot is fired. An excellent way of looking at it. Or I was going to put this, I forgot to put this in this in material, but now I can say it. Like that great philosopher Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. And then it's all over. So just amazing how much insight that he had into project management. All right. So let's take a look at the other side of the continuum, when things are less focused. And I would say the end result, the vision is a little blurry. I mean, it might be there sort of, but we can't quite put it in focus, right? So the vision is a little bit blurry. We know it's going to change. The requirements that we have are going to be uncovered throughout the project. And scope, well, scope is going to be defined, but only in the short term. Only very small chunks of scope can we define. But guess what? We're going to build a plan in Agile. Anybody that says that there isn't any planning in Agile, there is. There's a lot of planning. Big difference. In a predictive project, we build a big plan and follow the plan. In Agile, what do? We build a bunch of small plans, one time box or iteration at a time. And in Agile, when we're talking about that, kind of combines two things. The approach to work, which is called iterative. We're actually going to break things down into time boxes and work during those time boxes. And the other goal is to deliver incrementally, a little bit at a time. If you think about why we would want to deliver incrementally, and would we want to deliver incrementally even in a predictive or waterfall environment? If we could, absolutely. Might be a little bit difficult if I'm building a 5-story building. My most important tenant's going to be on the 5th floor. Well, let's just build the 5th floor first. That probably doesn't work with a physical asset, but what if you could? Wouldn't it make sense to do that so you can get that important client important tenant into the building as quickly as possible. And, maybe eventually we'll figure out ways that we can actually accomplish that. So we are going to create a vision, an endpoint. We're going to develop a way to get there, which was called a roadmap. And these things, unlike our baseline plan, these are things we just know are going to change. We're going to put kind of a stake in the sand out, but understand it's going to change throughout the life of our project, and we accept that. And we're going to plan the detail in small chunks. Those are called time boxes. There are two other words that we would use depending on the framework that you would use in Agile. Scrum calls those things sprints, and most other Agile frameworks call them iterations, but they're time boxes. So that's what we're going to follow, and we're going to figure out how much work we can do within that. And there is a constant loop. One of the advantages of Agile is a constant feedback loop that we would get. And that means we are going to inspect. So at the end of every time box, we inspect, we get feedback, and we adapt or replan. So notice how many times, probably in the history of project management, has somebody put together a long 12, 18, 24-month plan. It was perfect. We worked real hard. And at the end of that 18 or 24 months, the value that we created wasn't what we had anticipated because something changed. Market conditions changed, the organization changed. Agile allows us to do that in increments and be able to adjust if necessary. So there are some advantages. Obviously, predictive project management has a lot of advantages too. But in that case, the feedback, I think, is very, very important in Agile. So everybody with me now? We're good. Haven't gotten into this too much. Now we're going to have a little fun with our triple constraint. All right. If anybody's lost here, we can again inspect and adapt throughout this presentation. See how I put that in there? Adjust. All right. Well, I see some of you smiling on that. I don't know if you're, looking at something else. All right. So let's take a look at the triple constraint. We said one of the first slides, hey, the triple constraint applies, but does it apply the same way? So let's take a look, first of all, at predictive waterfall. Now, I know that there are circumstances where this wouldn't happen, but in general, what do we come up with first? When we're looking at that triple constraint or that iron triangle, most often we figure out the what first. We figure out what we're going to do, the requirements or the scope of the end result, because that vision is pretty clear. Based on that, then we would develop or estimate how much is it going to cost and how long is it going to take. So those are the three sides of our triple constraint. That's the order that we do it. Now, do we do the same thing in Agile? Well, not quite, because in an adaptive or Agile life cycle, what we lock in first typically is the schedule. Remember those time boxes. So we're going to do 1 to 4 week periods of development, whatever that development is. We're going to say that's locked in. So we're going to do 2-week sprints. And so that's locked in. And typically the type of projects that you're going to use in Agile are things that are not necessarily physical assets, such as software development as an example. So a lot of the cost that you're going to incur has to do with salaries of our developers. And if we're doing it consistently, we have a team that's together for a long time, how much are their salaries going to change period to period or time box to time box? So those things are going to be locked in typically up front. Then what do we negotiate? What do we figure out? In the next time box, how much are we going to be able to deliver? The features, the amount of scope we're going to be able to complete in that time box. And that's what I would call iterative work approach. So approaching work in time boxes that we're trying to get things done in that time frame. And as we're going to see later, we're going to do some feedback and adjustments. So that's more how we're going to approach the work. Now, before I go on to the next slide, let me apologize for this. This is not the best drawing, I got this off the internet. And the reason I got it off the internet is because I am not an artist and there is no way that I could draw anything better than this. So I do apologize for it. I'm just going to have to work through it. Eventually, maybe I can get my sister to draw this and it'll be wonderful, but so far not. So with that preface, let's take a look at how we're going to deliver things in Agile. So this is a cake. Anybody like cake? So I think I'm doing this at the right time because by the time we get done, got another hour or so in this meeting, everybody can, and you're sitting at home. Hopefully you have some cake that you can do because this will make you hungry. So let's take a look at how we would deliver this cake. So notice in this case, and again, I apologize for this being a technology related, but that's the example I found. Typically in a predictive project, what are we going to do? We're going to do the chunks of work for each type, like the data layer. We're going to do all of that. Then we're going to do the middleware for the whole project. We're going to do the web user interface, probably do testing and other things too. And what are we going to wind up doing? We're going to wind up delivering the whole cake. So we do it one layer at a time. And when the whole cake is done, that's what we deliver. How would we approach this in Agile? And obviously, this is not something that you could realistically do. And the reason you couldn't do it realistically is because it is a physical asset called a cake. But if you could, what if you could approach it one slice of cake at a time? So in this case, we're looking at the pay the order with a credit card. That's the slice of cake that I'm looking at. But notice when I'm doing that, the end result, I'm doing the data layer, I'm doing the middleware, I'm doing the web user interface, and I'm delivering that slice of cake. Now, what advantage do we have of that? There's a couple if you think about it. First of all, somebody can start eating the cake quickly, right? Because it usually takes a little bit longer, shorter amount of time to do one slice of cake than it would take to do the whole cake. And what else do we have as an advantage? What if I don't like the filling? If I don't like the filling, I can adjust. That would be inspect and adapt, right? So in the meantime, what have I invested in? I've invested only the effort that it was required to complete one slice of cake. Now, it's unfortunate that you can't do a cake this way because I know that a lot of you would say, the whole cake seems like a waste. Well, let's do it one slice at a time and I can enjoy it quicker and, make it seem like I'm not eating as much cake because it's only one slice. But you can't. But if we could, that's what we would do. So that analogy, I'm going to try to keep the analogy going throughout the rest of the presentation. Typically, as far as the delivery is concerned, in a predictive project, we tend to deliver a single delivery at the end of the project. If it's a building, we deliver the building. In Agile, we tend to look for incremental delivery. We're delivering things a little bit at a time and building on it. All right, so let's, wait a minute, I went ahead a little bit too quickly. Anybody confused with this analogy? Does it make sense? Oh, I think I lost some people now. Obviously, if I lost you, it's probably because you want some cake. So
in the chat we have makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
Janelle?
that's good. Glad it is. And I always say, I have to be careful when I do it. I figure it's safe to do it about this time. Usually in my PMP class, when I do this, it's usually close to lunchtime. I always want to make sure it's close to a meal so we don't. All right, crowd's getting tougher. All right, so let's just take a look pretty fast of the examples of when we would use each type of life cycle. And some of these probably just make a lot of sense because of the nature of the work that we're doing. Obviously, predictive, a great example is a construction project. Construction project ought to be well defined. And also the other thing which really predictive does have an advantage is complex dependencies. Sometimes Agile does not do well with complex dependencies. Now, there's some things that have come about in the Agile world that have tried to make sure that we have those complex dependencies taken care of, but in general, not. It's usually a focus on one particular thing over a short period of time. Predictive project management when there's a lot of moving parts, does a good job. Manufacturing processes, where there's detailed planning necessary, and the sequence of how things happen is going to be critical. Same thing with regulatory and compliance, as we're adhering to guidelines. Notice the common theme here. We have set things that we are trying to do. We're going toward a specific goal. Infrastructure upgrades, looking at all those interconnections and the complexity and making sure that we're delivering it and not losing any time. And things where there's a fixed budget. Usually if there's a fixed budget, we wind up having to also have a well-defined scope. So we say we're going to be able to do it in $100,000. Well, we better know what we're going to do in $100,000. So that's predictive. You probably makes sense to most of you. What about Agile? Probably the easiest. Should include process innovation. Do infrastructure using Agile? Yeah, there certainly can be. There certainly can be some things that we have. So that is, I'm not saying this is a hard and fast. You can only do construction this way, but in general, I think whenever there is a clear end result, predictive is going to be good. Whenever that end result is fuzzy, such as in software development, where we expect the requirements are going to evolve and we're counting on that feedback and that adaptation throughout. Product innovations, when we're testing new concepts and getting feedback. Marketing campaigns, where we're looking at a dynamic environment and feedback. Research and development, where we're doing experiments and there's an uncertain outcome and we would get feedback. And startup ventures. Startup ventures, I don't know if anybody on the call is an entrepreneur. I've had this conversation with Amber. I am not an entrepreneur. I think, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting a business, you got to expect that things are not all going to go well. And so you have to have that, the mindset where you're going to have to be able to sleep at night, knowing that a lot of your capital is at risk, right? So I wouldn't want to do that. But there is a concept in Agile which I do think is very, very important. It's called fail fast and learn. So if we try to do something, we figure out whether it worked or not. If it works, we go forward. If it didn't work, we learn from it and make adjustments. That time boxing will allow us to do that. If we fail on an 18-month project, to fix it is going to be very expensive. But if we fail on a 2-week iteration or 2-week sprint, we can recover from that, figure out what to do and make an adjustment. Keep that in mind as we go through and talk about some of the meetings or events that we're going to have when we get into the specifics in a few slides. All right, so let's take a look. This, I will say, is what I did on the fly on an easel pad in Alaska about comparing the two sides, predictive versus Agile. Now, this is where maybe some of the Scrum Master folks might have a little bit of a problem, but I think when you're thinking about this, to kind of equate how we're doing, how we're approaching, especially in this case, the scope, how we're getting to the scope, I think is important to understand. So let's start with the reason we're doing the project. And the reason we're doing the project, we probably have some kind of justification, some kind of document that comes from whoever's paying for the project that is going to tell us why we're doing it. If it's an internal project, most of the time that's called a business case. If it is an external project, we may have a contract, somebody paying for that. Then we determine what the vision is. What the vision is, and remember that wonderful document that we all know and love if we have anything to do with the Project Management Institute, the project charter. The project charter is that high-level document that says why we're doing the project, where do we want to wind up, what do we want to accomplish. And then in all cases, we're going to deal with people. We call them stakeholders. No matter what kind of project you're doing, you're dealing with stakeholders. Now, let me ask you a question. Any difference between a predictive project versus an agile project at this point? They're the same, right? We have high level, we have a reason to do the project, create some kind of document, let's call it a project charter, some kind of vision statement, and we're always dealing with people. So up until this point, we're exactly the same. Now we're going to separate it out and figure out how we're going to approach each one of them. Let's start with the predictive life cycle. Anybody remember those processes? Those of you who took the PMP test, do you remember reading through that lovely document called the PMBOK guide? And we have all those processes and how we were going to uncover our scope. The first one we did was something called collect requirements. But whether you know the formal process names or not, you're going to do this. You're going to collect requirements. Work with your stakeholders, look at the project charter, get a little bit more detail level of the requirements. And then you come up with formal documents. Requirements documentation is all the requirements, and specifically your product-related requirements you put in a document called a requirements traceability matrix. Requirements traceability matrix. Let me say that in English. So we document those because we have a pretty good understanding of what that vision is going to be. But we still need to define the scope a little bit more. So the next process that we would have is actually called define scope, where we're going to come up with this thing called the scope statement. Scope statement will now specifically say what deliverables we're going to create, what is the acceptance criteria for those deliverables, all written out. And then we're going to figure out how we're going to accomplish it. PMI calls that process create WBS, where we're going to create our work breakdown structure, one of my favorites, and our WBS dictionary, and we combine them all together to get a baseline plan. In this case, our scope baseline. And from that point forward, what's going to drive the project forward as far as the scope area is going to be concerned is that scope baseline. We're going to follow it. That's what we're going to deliver. Now, what about on the agile or adaptive side? Well, remember, everything's kind of fuzzy, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to have some targets. What we have on the adaptive or agile side is an inventory of all the items that we eventually want to be included in our product. That is called a product backlog. And all those bricks that are sitting there are backlog items, features, slices of cake that we want to be included eventually in our end product. What we're going to do, and the role that's important called the product owner, is actually going to sort these items, most important item first. So the ones that are going to deliver the most value to the organizations typically are on top. The one that delivers the second most value is going to be second, third, etc. So that is sort of equivalent to the requirements level on a predictive project. Again, staying away from being a purist. Now, what about the detailed plan? Because you notice on the left side of this, define scope, create WBS. That's a pretty detailed level of scope that we have. Do we have any detail over here on the agile or adaptive side? Well, remember, we do it for every time box, every sprint or iteration. So we're going to have a meeting where we're going to pull some of the things out of the product backlog, the things we believe as a team that we can deliver, we can complete in the next sprint. And from that, the sprint or iteration backlog. And notice this is where the detail is. This is things we know pretty well. These are the things we're going to work on next. So now the question really is, but I think from an understanding standpoint, it makes it simple. Are the requirements level or collect requirements on the predictive side equivalent or equal to the product backlog? For all intents and purposes, I think from an understanding standpoint, I would say yes. Just like I would say that scope baseline, we have a mini scope baseline, if you will, on the agile or adaptive side. All right, have I Have I made any of the Scrum Masters mad yet? I mean,
Nope, because I've had to adjust Scrum as I've learned it through manufacturing and financial industries. So yeah, I'm on board.
all right, good. Usually where I have to look around and make sure that no one is going to throw anything at me, but thankfully this is virtual, so it's you can throw a virtual piece of cake at me, I guess. All right, so does this make sense? Does this is this based on where you're coming from? Does this kind of clarify things a little bit? You know, because we have different terms in Agile than we have in predictive, but again, so many of the things are things that we do commonly, right? So they're all kind of, you know, following along. All right. Yeah. And I think that that's the case. And so many organizations are doing kind of a hybrid where you can, you know, you're uncovering the requirements a little bit at a time. And then, you know, when you get to the point where you're ready to do that, you're going to tighten them up. You're going to make them more detailed. All right, I'm just going to go through a couple of other things just at high level, and I'll make this I will share this presentation if anybody wants to see some of this, because the next few slides are really kind of a bit of detail around Scrum. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, and especially with our time box coming to an end pretty soon, I don't want to spend much time. But I'm going to include this as additional material. One thing that I do think is important is this empirical process. It's one of the kind of the cornerstones of Scrum. It's also the cornerstone of a lot of other Agile frameworks that we have. And there's three pillars in this empirical process. The first one is transparency. It's very, very important that everybody knows specifically what's going on. We want to be transparent within our team, with our stakeholders, so every stakeholder knows exactly what's going on right now. Now, is that a good idea in predictive project management? I would argue it is. You know, we may not always do it because we have those status reports that sometimes we're embarrassed about, but I think it's a good idea because we actually have potentially some stakeholders that can help us with it. But if we have a good understanding of what's going on, what can we do? We can inspect or check the work, and if necessary, make adjustments, adjust the direction, which is called adaptation. So those three pillars, we have to have a good understanding. We have to have a very accurate and transparent understanding, and then we're going to inspect and adapt in order to adjust our direction. The next slide talks about Scrum. I'm going to, for the most part, wrap it up here, but here we kind of follow a few things that we're going to do. Remember, we had our product backlog. That's everything that we know about right now that's going to eventually become part of our project. We do a detailed planning session called a sprint planning session here. Let me see if I can, let me stop this. Let me see if I can write on this to kind of see our sprint planning is kind of where we're going to move some of these items. Oops, I guess it would help if I actually had the pen going. Well, I did. All right, so we move some of these items from our product backlog over to our sprint backlog. We're going to work in a sprint. This is our time box, either sprint or iteration, typically 1 to 4 weeks. This says 2 to 4 weeks. The average right now for most, or the mean, I guess, is about 2 weeks. So we do 2-week time frames. We do a collaborative meeting every day where we're checking how things are going. That's called a daily Scrum. And I think the most important part of this is the 2 meetings that are held at the end of that time box. This is all about the inspection and adaptation. We do a sprint review. A sprint review is where we're going to look at the work that we completed. So this is product focused. This is where our stakeholders would look and say, yeah, the slice of cake looks really good. or, you know, I don't really like that filling. I need to make an adjustment. So this is mostly product focused, and we're figuring out, did we do a good job of meeting the criteria that we had agreed to at the beginning of the sprint? And then the other meeting that we have is really a continuous improvement meeting. It's called a retrospective. And this is more process focused. This is where the team is inspecting what they did, their processes, and adapting or adjusting as necessary. So notice the feedback loop comes at the end of every sprint. How long is your sprint? If it's 2 weeks, we're getting feedback every 2 weeks on the work that we did and the processes that we use to do it. So if necessary, we can make adjustments. All right, the next few, and again, I'll include this. It goes into the definition of a lot of these things. So we have, here's the 3 different roles we have in Scrum, and you can kind of read through them. Notice it's pretty simple, isn't it? We got 3 roles. We got a product owner, a Scrum master, and the rest of the team. They also have a few events, very specific events. All of these are time boxed. And is time boxing a good idea? I think time boxing is a great idea. And I think this is something that you can use in everyday, work. As anybody, just show of hands, anybody ever been in a meeting that lasted far too long? All right, I got another one. This is an even better question, I think. Has anybody ever left work on Friday afternoon? So your work week is done, Friday afternoon. And as you're leaving work, you said to yourself, I wish I had attended more meetings this week. Anybody?
Totally me. No.
I think and I think if you study effective meetings, one of the things they say is have a specific time frame for the meeting and have a purpose for the meeting and have the right people in the meeting. And I think we've all been in meetings that we're looking at each other, a few of us, and said, why are we here? We have nothing to contribute. It's not helping us, but we're in this meeting. Well, in Agile, we try to make these meetings very specific. The right people are there for a specific purpose, and there's a specific time box that we're going to follow. Agenda, that would be good. Have an agenda for every meeting and then stick to the agenda. If you could do that, you're probably quite a bit along the way of having better meetings. All right, and then there's 3 artifacts. So again, this is fairly simple, but I'm going to leave you to, if you so desire, to go through those and look at some of those definitions. And then I'm just going to wrap back around. So I think that's a good wrap of the beginning of Scrum. And the roles, the events, and the artifacts, making sure you know what those are, and come back to this slide to wrap it all up. All right, I just have a couple more. I think this one's fun though, because it kind of shows how lightweight Scrum specifically is. So I did the math. If you look at the current PMBOK guide, and keep in mind the current PMBOK guide is kind of it's significantly less than the last PMBOK guide. PMBOK 7 is about half the size of PMBOK 6. I think PMBOK 6 was something like 788 pages. The current one is only 341. However, they took all those processes from the 6th edition and moved them to another document, another book called the Process Group, a practice guide. And that has 347 pages. So now we're almost up to what the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide has, about 688 pages worth of stuff. So, and guess what? That is a lightweight framework. That is a framework. It's not a methodology, is it? It's a framework for doing projects. So you want to talk about a very...
Oh, you went on mute, John. Oh. John, I don't know if you can hear. I'm sure you just said amazing things. You were on mute.
Yeah, I was, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I had a little thing that came up as you've been muted. It's like, okay, I guess I'm done. But the Scrum guide, by the way, if anybody's interested, you can download the entire Scrum guide. There, I have the website there. 14 pages, including the title page. That's it. So we believe that one of the co-creators of the Scrum framework, Ken Schwarber, is credited with this quote, although I don't think he admitted to it, but I think it's very, very apropos. Scrum is extremely simple to understand. Yeah, so it's extremely simple to understand. 14 pages, 13 pages I can read, but difficult to master. So yeah, I got this framework, but I bet if we talk to some of the Scrum masters on this, yeah, it's a constant learning, and it's not just those 13 pages that we need to be concerned with. All right. So how do we do? Anybody feel, let me ask this question. I always want to ask the negative first. Anybody more confused about Agile than you were when we started this? More confused? And I got an entire, yep. I have that too. And I didn't take as many notes in my Scrum guide, but I got a real long list of references. All right, so hopefully what we have done, if we want to have a little bit better understanding what we could do in an hour or so of Agile project management, hopefully you understand how predictive and Agile in some cases are the same. In general, when does it make sense to use the tools from the toolkit that have to do with predictive project management? When does it make sense to use the tools that have to do with Agile project management? And hopefully we added to your toolkit at least something. All right, so who's ready to be a Scrum Master? Anybody? This is just so exciting. I got to go take a certified Scrum Master class. Well, you're probably shy. I'm sure most of you are.
Actually, I went to Spotify and pulled up the guide you were talking about on Spotify. So it's 24 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it was just updated on the 22nd of September, so it's pretty current.
Yeah, well, just be careful of that because the Scrum Guide itself has not been changed since 2020. So maybe somebody actually said it. So that's the current version of that. But if you go to that website or go to the Scrum Alliance, they have a copy of it.
Thank you.
All right, what questions do you have? Let me get them.
There's one question in chat. Do you have any recommendations for getting certified?
Well, I can tell you that a really good start is a certified Scrum Master course. Those are fairly short. They're usually 2-day courses. I took it, that was, at night for 4 days. So it was like, 6 to 10 every night. It is, if you have a PMP, it's nowhere, it is not to the depth of a PMP, but it kind of primes you a little bit. It helps you understand the Agile mindset, gets you focused on that. There's some exercises there. I think that it's a good program. And then afterwards, they typically most of the certified Scrum Master courses will then give you a voucher to go and take the test. You can add some initials after your name. I think if you're really interested in Agile, you shouldn't stop there, but you got to start someplace. And I do think that that's an excellent place to start. And some of the Scrum Masters might chime in to say yes or no as far as that's concerned, whether that's a good approach.
Yeah, I would agree with you, John. I received my Scrum Master in 22, and it was 2 or 3 days, a handful of hours each day, and I had my PMP already, so I had some base knowledge, right? But absolute great starting point.
Yeah, and the other question is, and this is a good one. How can you tell whether somebody is actually certified? Well, the Scrum Alliance does have a registry, just like PMI does. But you can get a Scrum Master, become a certified Scrum Master in a lot of different other areas. So you know, it's not like the PMP. PMP is, you know, consistent across the world. There are several organizations that will give you a Scrum Master certification. PMI's own Discipline Agile. I am a certified senior Scrum Master for Discipline Agile. It shows up in their registry, but not all of them are the same. So that is that's one thing. Usually the Scrum Alliance is probably the best organization for it, and they do have a registry. So perhaps a presentation shift from predictive for risk management using Agile to return to predictive. Yeah, you know, I do think there's a lot of things that you can include, kind of the hybrid, and include some Agile within a predictive project, such as creating a design. I mean, could you use Agile or Sprint approach to create a design and then take that design and create a detailed plan in order to execute? Risk management is another great one. I do think is a good idea because of that constant feedback in the loop that we're doing of identifying and analyzing and planning responses and implementing responses and seeing how it's going. So yeah, I do think that is a good approach. The presentation, I'm going to send the presentation to your leadership here, and then I'm going to count on them to get that out there. But certainly, there's nothing here that I put this together, so there's nothing that I have a problem with. I'm not trying to sell it.
John, I'd
Yeah.
like to make a comment regarding the questions about when should you do which, predictive or adaptive.
Yeah.
When I am looking at any given stage, almost every project that I work on, they might say they're using Agile, but it starts out looking waterfall. But I take the principles that are in the Agile manifesto and look down through those and see, okay, how many of these actually are real? Because if they are in the circumstance I'm in, then I can use adaptive.
Yep.
But if they're not, for example, the people are not close together, there's not a lot of communication between product owner and the developers, stuff like that, then maybe predictive. So I often go back to the Agile manifesto
Yes.
and the principles to decide, which way I need to go.
Yeah,
this
I
point,
didn't
they're
really
in
have
my
time to
mind. I
talk
don't
about
even
the
have
Agile
to physically
manifesto, but
look.
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sherman. Thank you, John, so much. I think that was an amazing presentation. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to put those in the chat. You can reach out to John. We'll send out the slides and all of that information to your emails. John, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just a couple. I got to do a little
Yeah.
commercial. Although I told Luvianic when I started, I wasn't a salesperson, so I will include this information about Luvianic. So we have several service lines. I'm the head of the training service line. So we are an authorized training partner. We do both public, although not too many, public classes and B2B classes. So if you want anything on this inventory that you would like to do, please get a hold of me. There is the email address for that, and also our web address if you're interested. And I can tell you just real quickly, we do have a public class coming up in case you're interested in the risk management professional, the RMP, which I think is a good add-on to the PMP for a lot of people, especially in predictive project management, but anything, because we have 1.5 million PMPs in the world, and I think that people are looking for a way to kind of distinguish themselves. I will not be wearing a suit during that class, I just want to be clear. But it is, there's the information if you're interested. It's going to be an online class. It is 3 days. And we are offering for you, if you decide, the normal price is $13.95. But if you use that promo code and thank the local Space Coast PMI chapter for sharing it with you, that Space PMI 24, that will get you $100 off if you're interested. It's coming up in March. And please feel free to get a hold of me if you have any questions and about this presentation, about any kind of training, about the upcoming RMP class. That is my contact information. All of it will be included in the slide presentation. So sorry for going a little bit over on this, but hopefully everyone found it at least somewhat worthwhile.
I'm sure they did. I thought it was a lot of great information, and please, everybody, don't hang up yet. So I think we mentioned this, Tony, do you have a question? Okay. We mentioned something that we like to do at the end of each session. We still have 20 minutes. So we have what's called a SME real world session. So this is the opportunity where if anybody has a question about a project they have going on where they need some advice, you know, maybe you're having problems with a stakeholder, maybe you're not sure how to do something in scope, or you have a team member that's not pulling their weight, any kind of question that you might have. We have a multitude of experience levels in different, you know, industries. So now is the perfect time to ask your question because nobody in this group will be shy about giving you advice. The only requirement is that you come back and tell us in a month or two if our advice was helpful to you. So does anybody have any questions they would like to ask this amazingly talented group of people? Everybody's lives are problem-free. Jenna-Leah, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's more just a question about a recommendation, really. So we're shopping for project management software. And, you know, up until this point, we've done sort of a combination of several different things. We use ConnectWise for our CRM, and I hate their project management software. So I'm really trying to get away from that. We're leaning towards MS Project because we do have some very complex projects and then others that are more simple, but wondering if anybody has any feedback on that.
Mm-hmm. I can actually speak to that a little bit if you don't mind. So if you're doing, so you want a software that does for complex projects, but also the lighter lift, are you looking for some like customized, I can't talk, to be customized?
Bit of that, or just as I recall, the experience I had with project was that you could utilize all the bells and whistles, but you sure didn't have to necessarily if it was overkill. Which I'd like to be able to do that as opposed to trying to manage complex projects in one way and more streamlined ones in another.
Yeah. Smartsheet is
I've looked at that.
Okay.
Did you like that one?
Yeah, so I really like Smartsheet. It's super customizable. With the right like spice added to it, you can make it into MS Project almost very similar, but you can add more to it and make it add filters, all of that, and customize it to your needs. So and you can also make it very, very simplistic. So if you didn't want to look at all of that stuff, you can make a very straightforward, just get the job done kind of project plan for you.
And Amber is very experienced with Smartsheet, so
She would like
can
to
definitely answer any questions you might have.
Okay.
Anybody else want to speak up for their software? Sabrina, I'm shocked. We used Monday.com at Everwise, and everybody seems very fond of that.
Yeah, I've looked at that as well. My my boss is a little fond of that one. Yeah.
There There is and I'm trying to find it right now. There is a great comparison on, I searched it on Google and I can't find it right now, but if time allows, there is a great comparison out there of a simple chart that talks about all of the top 5 parameters that you need to start one up, your basics one, users, freeze, those type of things. And I cannot find it right now, but if I come across it, I'll stick it in the chat.
Okay.
But it's, gosh, when you said that, I'm like, oh, where's that at? I can't find it right off the top of my head.
Well, thanks. Maybe I'll look around for it if you can't find it. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Any advice for her?
Now, if you are looking to go to the next level, right? Program management perspective, we use PPM Pro. And it has so many bells and whistles in the backside of it that you just you can't get through all of it either. So
I think we're on the cusp of that. We're at the point where we have what I would say we have clients where program management is really what we're starting to do as opposed to just project management, because we have multiple projects with the same client under a bigger umbrella. So that's a good hint.
Yeah, I found it. It's under project-management.com. I'll post it here.
One of the
This
things
is the
I
one
would
I was
suggest
looking
is
at
to
the
put
other day.
together a
So
script of what you need, and then have the organizations actually work through the script. And just be prepared that most of them won't do it. They're going to give you your presentation, but the ones that do, and make sure that covers what you're doing. Because I always say that these software packages are great, but they're tools, right? I want to be able to do what I need to do, and I'll use the tool to do it. But I'm not going to pick the sexiest tool just because it looks good.
And I
Makes
think one of the
sense.
thing about the tools, you got to really think through it, because what are you trying to manage? Are you trying to manage resources? Are you trying to manage tasks? Are you trying to manage the overall project? Because, like Resource Guru and some of these other ones, they're all about the resource being available to do the next task versus Smart Sheets, right? Smart Sheets is, you can use the basic side of Excel, the Excel side of it all the way through the Agile tabs and boards and build out a full thing. So that's the real piece that helps figure some of the objects out, right?
That's a good point. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I was going to just add real quick to a little bit about what Brian was saying, which is just that understanding of, am I managing individual projects where they're each running independently? Do I need to get that portfolio view and that reporting across projects and sharing resources and being able to see that larger view and getting into that program management side too. So I think that's one of the things that I've seen in the past is had great tools for managing individual projects, but when you want to see those projects all next to each other and stacked up, that's where things start to break down.
And that's where we are. We're right at the cusp of that. So, okay. Thank you. And thanks for that link.
Okay. That's a perfect example of how this SME session is supposed to work. So anybody have any other questions they would like to ask this very talented group? Nope. Okay. Then John has provided us our slides, so we'll work on getting that out to folks and making the recording available when we can. Really appreciate you guys all attending tonight. We have an exciting program for February. You heard Takesha here tonight. She's going to be our speaker next month. And then in March, we are back to being remote because we have a very well-known in the field speaker, Carl Pritchard, that has spoken before. And I believe he's speaking on ADCAR. Is that correct, Amber? We may have lost Amber, but yeah, that is
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So, okay, so really looking forward to seeing you guys all in the next few months. And we'll, if you're a chapter member, we'll turn in the PDUs for you. And if you're not, you can send us your number and we'll get them turned in. Okay? Thanks, everybody, and be safe the next few days in this weather.
Thank you, everyone, very much.
Thank you for listening.
you.
Yep,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Good
it.
night, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Night.
Goodbye.